Hello, I'm Axel Wilkinson, and thank you for taking the time to watch this HitFilm tutorial. If you are new to HitFilm, or to video editing in general, this tutorial is a great place to start. HitFilm is capable of some incredible effects and epic projects once you get up to speed, but today we want to start simple to help you get familiar with the layout of the program and some fundamental tools and concepts. So let's launch HitFilm, and we are going to walk through a project from start to finish to help you get familiar with the basic tools and techniques that you will use in HitFilm. As the program launches, we are greeted by the home screen. If you are connected to the internet, this screen provides links to tutorials, various aspects of the online community, such as the forums and the blog, and any updates to the HitFilm software. The home screen also provides a list of recent projects you have worked on. Now, if this is the first time you're launching HitFilm, you won't see any projects listed here yet, but as you continue to work with the software, your recent projects will be listed here so you can quickly access them. We will click the New Project button to start a new project. This moves us to the project screen, where we can control the specific settings our project will use. The screens in HitFilm follow a logical progression as we work through our project, but we can move between screens at any time using the large buttons at the top of the interface. So, if we know the specific format of the footage we're going to use, we can select a template that will match that footage. Or we can enter in the specific properties that our footage requires. The right side of the screen provides explanations of all of the settings we can adjust here. If you aren't sure which settings to use though, don't worry, we can let HitFilm choose the correct settings for us later. So let's leave all of these at their default and click the Start Editing button. This moves us to the next screen, the Edit and Effects screen, which is where nearly all of our HitFilm work will take place. The Edit and Effects screen is broken into panels, each of which serves a specific purpose. All the media that you import will be organized into the Media panel. You can edit this media together on the Editor timeline. Anything placed in the editor can be seen in the Viewer panel. And when you want to add effects, they can be found in the Effects panel. In containers holding more than one panel, you can switch between the panels by clicking on their various tabs. We'll see many of these panels in action as we get into our project. First, though, we need to import the media that we wish to use. You can download the exact footage I'll be using and the project file from the HitFilm.com website so you can easily follow along with me. In the Media panel, click the Import button and navigate to the folder containing the files you wish to use. After selecting one file, you can shift-click to select a continuous string of files or hold Control and click to select additional files in any order. Then click the Open button to import these files into HitFilm's Media panel. Now we can use these clips to create a sequence in the editor. If you want to add an entire clip to the timeline, you can just drag it straight from the Media panel onto the editor. When adding your first clip, if the format of the clip doesn't match the project settings, this window gives us the option to change our project settings to match the footage. So click Yes, and the project settings will automatically be changed to perfectly match our footage. In C10, there is a bit where the camera starts on the pedals and then pans up to the characters' faces, which I think will work well as an intro shot for our characters. So select that clip, and it will open in this little preview called the trimmer at the top of the Media panel, and we can select the portion of the clip we want to use. We can use these blue handles to trim the ends off of this clip and select only the portion that we want to use. Then you can click anywhere inside this blue box and just drag that clip onto the timeline. We'll place it right after our first clip. Next, let's use a bit from clip C13. This time, click the play button on the trimmer and let it play. And then when you get to the frame where you want to place your in point, hit the I key on the keyboard. That stands for in. Then we can resume playing, and we'll use the O key to mark the out point when we get to it. So here, we're just using an alternate technique. Rather than dragging the blue handles, we're using the keyboard to mark the portion of the clip that we want to use. So here, as they stop and they look at each other, I want to mark the out point by hitting O for out right there. Then we can just drag this clip onto the timeline following the others. Now, rather than playing the clip, you could also scrub through it. Scrubbing is when you just drag the playhead through the clip to preview it very quickly. And so you could just scrub through to find a point and then use the keyboard to mark the in and out points as an alternate way to select the portion of the clip you want to use. Now we will select a bit from clip C3 of them riding. Use whichever technique on the trimmer you're most comfortable with to select a small piece from the middle of this clip. I'm going to drag the blue handles to make my selection. Now in our final clip on the timeline, clip C13, they stop riding their bikes, and so we want to place this bit from clip 3 before clip 13 on the timeline. So let's zoom in a bit on our timeline. This slider down here controls the zoom level, so we can just drag that to the right till our clips fill up most of the visible area of the timeline. And now we're going to drag this clip onto our cut right here, in between these other two. You can see the position of the clip there right over the existing clip on the timeline, and when we drop it, that bit of the original clip is just removed and replaced by the new clip we've just put there. That type of edit is called an overwrite, and it's not what we want. So let's undo that. You can either use the undo button here at the top of the interface or hit Ctrl-Z on your keyboard. And now we'll drag this back to the timeline, but this time hold down the Shift key while you drop the clip. And this will perform what's called an insert edit. It will shift all the other clips on the timeline apart to make room for our new clip to be inserted. So now that we have all of our clips in place there, let's move the playhead back to the beginning of the timeline, and then we'll click the play button in the viewer to view the project and see how all of our clips fit together. Okay, so that third clip is a bit too short, but more importantly, I think they're just riding too fast, and it doesn't really fit well in the context of these other clips. So let's go ahead and just delete that clip. If we select that clip on the timeline and hit delete, then we end up with a gap in our timeline. We can close that gap by grabbing our last clip and just dragging it to the left, but if we had dozens of clips over there, this would be awkward at best to drag them all over to close that gap. So let's hit Ctrl-Z to undo that move, and instead, we can right-click in the gap and choose Ripple Delete Gap from the menu. And this will take everything positioned to the right of the gap on the timeline and nudge it all over until the gap is closed. But even this uses more steps than is necessary. So, hit Undo or Ctrl-Z repeatedly until the clip is back in place, and this time, right-click on the clip and choose Ripple Delete. This performs both the delete and the ripple at the same time, so we never have a gap to deal with. Any tool with ripple in its name will auto-shift anything to the right on the timeline to fill in any gap that would otherwise be created. Okay, I think the first clip goes on for a bit too long, so we need to trim some off the end of it. So let's just play that from the beginning, and I think about 3 seconds there is enough. So let's move the playhead to the 3-second mark, and we'll select the Slice tool, which is the one that looks like a razor blade here. With the Slice tool selected, notice that as we move our cursor close to the playhead, the line marking the playhead turns red. This indicates that the tool is snapping to the position of the playhead. When we cut now, it will cut exactly at the frame where the playhead is sitting. This snapping behavior can be very useful if you need to cut at a precise frame. You can use this magnet icon at the lower left to turn snapping on and off. Now that we've cut our clip, we can right-click on the second half and ripple delete it. On this second clip, I think the peaceful feeling created by the first clip is kind of broken by the pedaling at the start there, and maybe if we came in here where they're coasting, it might work better. So I want to trim off the start of this clip to the point where the cyclists are coasting. We'll use a different technique here. Select the Ripple tool, which is the second one from the bottom. If you're using HitFilm 1, this tool isn't available, so you'll have to use the same technique we just used, cutting the clip and then deleting one portion. But with the Ripple tool in HitFilm 2, notice that there's 2 arrows in the little tool icon, and based on which side of the cut we move to, one of them turns white. The white arrow indicates which clip will get trimmed by the tool. So we want to position our tool over the second clip, and then when we click and drag, notice that the viewer changes. On the left is our preceding clip, And on the right, we see the first frame of the second clip based on our current edit. So as we drag on the timeline, the viewer updates to show where the cut would happen in that clip. So drag until we get to the coasting bit, and then release the mouse button. Again, because this is a ripple tool, the gap is closed automatically. So this gives the same basic effect as our first edit, but with far fewer steps, as we didn't have to find the frame, cut the clip, then delete and close the gap. Okay, so now that we have our basic edit done, this is a good time to save our project. In the File menu, click Save, then name your project and choose where you want to save it. I'm going to name that, save it into my Videos folder. HitFilm 2 has an autosave feature built in, so you don't have to be paranoid about losing your work, but in any video software, you should make it a habit to regularly save your work deliberately as you go. Once the project is saved, we'll be able to access it through the home screen next time we launch HitFilm, so we can easily resume working on it from the exact point we left off. Now let's add some audio to our project. We have a little ditty here, which I put together a few years back, and we can just drag that down onto Audio 1 to add it into our project. Now notice that as we drag this in, because snapping is turned on, it's very easy to line the start of this up with any edit on our timeline, if we wanted to. But in this case, just line it up with the beginning of the timeline. Now, trim this clip so that it's the same length as your video tracks. You can use whichever technique you are most comfortable with to do this. I'm going to select the slice tool, cut it right there, and then just select the second half and delete it. Now, if we play this with the audio, it feels a little too loud. So, to change the volume of any audio clip, you can just position your mouse over this white line, and notice how it becomes arrows pointing up and down, and we can drag up or down to turn the audio up or down. So we're going to drag downward on that a bit. You might notice a similar line running through all the video clips, and that controls each clip's opacity. Now, perhaps we want to add some effects, or maybe we want to add a title to our project. For this, we will use a different timeline. The editor timeline in HitFilm is designed for piecing our video clips together, like we just have, but once we want to start creating new elements, like effects or titles, we will want to use a different type of timeline called a composite shot. There is one master editor timeline in a HitFilm 2 project, but we can have as many composite shot timelines as we want. In this case, let's use a composite shot to create a 3D extruded title. Composite shots look and function differently from the editor timeline. In the editor, we have tracks, which can contain multiple clips. For example, track Video 1 contains all 3 of our video clips. To see how composite shots differ, go to the Media panel, open the New menu, and choose Composite Shot. Let's rename this to Opening Title, and for the duration, let's change this from 30 seconds to 5 seconds. Then click OK, and a new timeline will be created. Notice that now we have tabs that allow us to move between the timelines. And in our composite shot, if I add a few objects here, you can see that now we have a list of layers rather than tracks, and each object we add has its own layer. The layers stack up like sheets of paper, so whichever layer is highest on the timeline will appear to be in front of the layers below it. So here we have 3 layers, but only the top layer is visible. If I turn that layer off using this eyeball icon, then we can see the layer underneath it. You can reorder layers on the timeline by simply dragging their title, and as you drag, a green line will appear indicating where the layer will be dropped. Okay, let's delete these. I will shift-click to select all of those and hit delete, and let's add a new text layer. Notice that in our composite shot, we have more tools available in our viewer panel. One of these is the text tool, which looks like a T. Select it and drag a rectangle onto the viewer. This rectangle will contain our text, so click inside and then type in whatever text you want to use for your title. If we want to edit our text, we can do so in the text panel. Remember, we just click the tab to open that panel, and now we can select the text we want to edit and adjust it to suit our taste. So you can type in whatever text you want to use for your title, and you can choose any font and size you prefer, though I recommend keeping the size fairly large so that it's easily readable. I'm going to use Myriad Web Pro as my font. I'm going to center the text, and then I'm just going to click on the value for the size and drag until that's about 150. Okay, now switch back to the editor and we can add that text to our timeline. In the media panel, locate our opening title asset. So here's our composite shot, and when editing, we can use composite shots exactly like we would video clips. So we can just drag this title directly into the editor, but this time, drag it into the space above our first clip and drop it, and a new track, Video 2, will be created on the editor. So now the text appears right over the top of the footage below it. We can continue to edit this text in the opening title composite, and any changes we make will immediately be updated to the object on the editor timeline as well. So let's switch back to our opening title comp. Comp is short for composite or composite shot, and we'll use an effect to extrude the text. So click the tab to switch back to the effects panel and open the generate folder by clicking on the little triangle here, and you'll see the 3D extrusion effect. Notice that this effect says layer only next to it. Any effects marked in this way can only be used in composite shots. But any effects without that label, which you can see is actually most of them, can also be applied directly to clips in the editor, although you won't have as many options for adjusting the effects. So we're going to take that 3D extrusion effect and drag it right onto our new text layer. Now double-click the name of the 3D extrusion effect to open it in the controls panel. Let's adjust the depth a bit to make the extrusion more dramatic. You can drag the slider, or if you want finer control, click on the value and drag left or right to change it. I'm going to use a value of about 50. Switch back to the editor now, and you can see that the title is already updated to show the extrusion effect we just created. So we can go back and forth to edit effects or titles at any time in their composite shots, and they will instantly update in every place that composite shot is present. Remember when I mentioned that some effects could be used in the editor? Let's use that technique to adjust the color so that all of our clips match. Our first two clips have kind of a washed out, warm, summery feel to them, while the last one has much stronger contrast. So I want to reduce the contrast in this last clip so that it matches the first two clips better. So in the effects panel, open the color correction folder, and then we'll drag the brightness and contrast effect onto our final clip on the timeline. So with that clip selected, open up the effects heading in the controls panel, and then there's the brightness and contrast clip. We can open that, and we need to drag the contrast slider to the left to reduce the contrast. You could also change it with the value, but we need to get a setting of about -20. Okay, now if we compare that clip with the clips before, it's matching better, but I'd still like to tone down the colors a little bit more in this final clip. So we'll use the hue, saturation, and lightness effect. We'll drag that one on. Then we open the controls, and in the master controls, there's our hue, saturation, and lightness, and we'll reduce the saturation to about -20. Now the color in our clips is matching much better, so let's go ahead and save our project again, this time using the keyboard shortcut Control-S. It's good to just get in the habit of hitting Control-S from time to quickly save your project. In composite shots, we can change almost any property of a layer or an effect over time. This is called animation or keyframing. Let's create a new composite to look into this further. Remember, for our title, we created a new composite shot through the media panel. This time we will use a different technique to convert a video clip in the editor into a composite shot. So right-click on our first clip, this one of the wheat field, right-click and choose Make Composite Shot. We can rename that. Let's name it Wheat Field. And then click the Convert button. We now get a new composite shot timeline containing that clip. And if we go back to the editor, you can see that that comp retains the position and duration of the original clip. We can switch back to the wheat field timeline by clicking its tab or by double-clicking on it in the editor. Let's add a hue, saturation, and lightness effect to the clip by dragging it from the effects panel. We're going to animate the saturation property so that this clip starts out black and white and the color is gradually revealed. So double-click on the effect name to open it in the Controls panel, then open the Master Controls. Notice the little circle next to the name of each of these properties? This is a toggle, which we can turn on and off like a switch. When it's on, keyframing is enabled, and we can animate or change the value of a property over time. So make sure your playhead is on frame 0, and then click the toggle next to saturation. It turns green to indicate that it's on, and on the timeline, a small diamond is created at the current playhead position. This is a keyframe, which stores the current value for this property. We can edit the saturation value either here on the timeline or in the Controls panel. It doesn't make any difference. Either one will update it. So set the saturation to -100 to remove all the color from the clip, and that new value will now be stored in our keyframe. Now, advance the playhead to the 2-second mark, and here we will bring the color back in. As soon as we make a change to our value, a new keyframe will be created. So you can see there's nothing here on the timeline yet, but as soon as we make a change to this value, a new keyframe is created to store the new value that we've selected. So we'll actually set that value to 0 on this frame, and that will bring the original color back. So now, out of all the frames on the timeline, we have 2 which are keyframes, and these are marked by these diamonds. Each of these 2 frames stores a specific value for this property. So if we have a value of -100 here, and then at the 2-second mark we have a value of 0, guess what the value will be halfway between them? Well, if you guessed -50, you are spot on. Just as you might expect, the value, if you watch this readout, smoothly changes between the 2 keyframes. This is the basic process for animation in any composite shot. Enable keyframing for the property you wish to animate by clicking on its toggle, and then every time you make a change to that property's value, a new keyframe will be created to store that value at the current playhead position. Switch back to the editor now, and let's take another look at envelopes, which is the proper name for these lines that control the audio levels and clip opacity. We can actually create keyframes in these as well using a different technique. So let's move to the end of our edit here and select clip C13. And you'll notice that in the hue, saturation, and lightness effect we added here, we don't have an option to enable keyframing because we're on the editor timeline. If we were inside a composite shot, then we could animate those. But in the editor, you can adjust the values, but they're going to remain constant throughout the duration of the clip. But we can animate the opacity of that clip or the level of our audio. So perhaps we want to keyframe our audio so that it fades out. We can control-click, hold Control, and click on this white line. And each time we do that, we'll create a new keyframe on that line. So we want 2 keyframes at the end here. And then once those are created, we can select them and drag them left or right to change their time, and up and down to set the value. So drag this second keyframe all the way down into the corner, and now when we play that clip back, you can hear that the audio now has a nice fade out. We can also use transitions on the editor. If we close the color correction folder and open the transitions video folder, then the dissolve, we have an assortment of transitions available to us here. So let's grab the cross dissolve and we'll drag it onto the cut between these 2 clips. We can drop that there, and now if we play through, we instantly have a smooth transition as one clip fades out and the next one fades in. Let's use 2 more transitions, this time on our opening title. Instead of a dissolve, let's use a wipe. We'll use the linear wipe, and this time we'll drag it onto the start of the clip and onto the end of the clip. So in the first case, our transition overlaps the edit. In this case, they butt up to the edit on either end. So now if we play through that, you can see how the title is wiped on and then wiped off by those transitions. The final step of a HitFilm project is to export, which takes all of these clips that we've used and the effects we've added and combines them together to create a single new video file. This is handled in the export screen, so click the export button to move there. At the top of the export screen, we can choose which part of our project we wish to export. In this case, we have the editor and then the two composite shot timelines that we created. So we'll choose the editor, and content area will export only the portion of the timeline which contains video. So if we switch back to Edit and Effects, you can see we have this empty space here at the end of the editor. That will be ignored if we have this set to content area. The format that you choose will affect what options appear here in the lower portion of the screen. Each of the options available here will be explained on the right-hand portion of the export screen here. You can also export your video directly to your YouTube channel by clicking the YouTube tab here on the left. If you are using the demo of HitFilm, only YouTube export is available. Let's export our project to our computer using the MP4 format and the default settings here. Click Export and choose a location and name for your video and click Save. The export will begin, and the progress and the time remaining will be displayed here in the export window. Well, congratulations! You have successfully completed your first HitFilm project. What I'd like you to do now is take this same footage and try editing it into a completely different sequence. Change the order of the clips. Change how quickly you cut from one to the next. Try adding different transitions between the clips. Use different music. Just experiment, and as you do so, pay attention to how your changes affect the overall feel of the final result. And if you come up with a result that you really like, please share it with us on the HitFilm forums. Now that our export is complete, you can click play to view it right away, or view the file in its location by clicking the Open Folder button. So there's our file that we created. Remember that you can always ask questions, discuss techniques, or share your results on the HitFilm.com forums, where there's a whole community of fellow HitFilm users that are happy to assist you. And when you're ready to continue your education, keep in mind that we have dozens of additional tutorials ranging from basic to advanced techniques available on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you to subscribe if you haven't yet. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this tutorial. If you have any questions, please let us know, and hopefully we will see you around.